Illustrator is an amazing program. The fact that you can create vector shapes which are completely scalable and it never gets pixelated is why the professionals use it. But there is a lot to learn. I'm Miss Eden, and in this video I'm going to share with you my 5 top tips on how to bypass all those tricky things and create a really cool vector picture just like this one. Let's get going.
To begin with, we're going to start a new document. So we're going to go File, New, and then you can set whichever size you particularly want. I'm going to stick with A4, and then we want to pick the orientation, either landscape or portrait. There are obviously other factors as well. We could name it here as well. So I'm going to call it I'll be there for you. Oops, check my spelling. And then we're going to go OK. Let's start by bringing in a colourful background. So I'm going to go to the internet, and I like to use Ecosia, not just because it's a company, but also because the quality of the pictures is pretty good. So I'm going to do a search. Let's try maybe for a pale blue texture background. You want to be specific whenever you are putting in information into the search, because that will obviously change the outcome. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time scrolling through. Here's the one that I've chosen, and the nice thing about Ecosia is that you can view the image just by itself rather than it directing you to the website. So I'm going to click and go copy, and then I'm going to go back down into Illustrator. Now you can't right click and go paste, it's one of Illustrator's quirks. You can go edit, paste, or you can just press Ctrl V. There we go. And now I'm going to maximize its size because I don't have to worry about the proportion in this particular case because it's a fairly abstract picture. I'm just going to not worry about if I stretch it out or shrink it down. I'm going to show you how to use the effect gallery. So up here along the top, we want the tab that says Effect. I'm going to go down to Effect Gallery, and it's going to open it up. And it has a huge range of artistic and brushstroke and all sorts of different fun textures. You can even make it reverse. So these has stained glass, a glassy effect, a watercolour, that's quite cool, it's a bit dark for what I'm looking for. A diffuse glow. I'm going to go with this one because I still can see the hint of the stars beneath, but it's a little bit more interesting, a little bit more abstract. And then I'm going to go OK. There we go, so that's the use of the effects gallery. Now what I want to do is I want to keep this on its own separate layer, otherwise it's going to end up interacting with anything else I might end up putting on top of it. So over here on the right hand side we have layers. If you can't see it, you can always go to Window, and in alphabetical order is everything that you should need, and layers is right there. So if we open it up, we can create a new layer like so, and then I'm going to start building on things. But you can see the little background, which is in blue. You can turn it on and off. I can change the visibility. I can also lock it. There we go. Now I can't interact with it at all unless I turn it off again. Control Z to undo. So I'm going to keep it locked on, and now I'm going to go back and work in layer 2 and hide that down. Next, I want to include an organic kind of shape with some colour just to set the tone and lift the objects off the page and make it slightly less static. Now, there are multiple ways that we could do it. We could just use the Shapes tool, which is over here. So you have to press and hold to access the different shapes. You could create a rectangle, or you could create an ellipse perhaps. If you press Shift, it keeps it as a proportioned shape. You could maybe make an ellipse. You could do a polygon, you could do a star. If you click on it, even has how many points you could create. So you could do a big kind of star, that's pretty cool. So lots of different ways you could do it. The way that I'm going to do it for now to keep it really organic is I'm going to use the pen tool. If you're not very familiar, then check out the other videos. So what we do with the pen tool, I'm going to just create a simple organic shape with 3 main points. So for the first point of our pen tool is always just a click, nothing else. And then the next point I'm going to have somewhere over here, and I don't let go of my left mouse click, and I drag the handles out and I can move them in space and orientate it. If I was just to click, it would just be a straight line, but by holding the click, it doesn't do that. There we go. Now I'm going to release. Now I'm going to go to my next point, so over here, create a nice organic shape, pull that out a little bit. You can see how the handles change everything. And then I want to close the shape. I know when the shape is closed because of the little circle that's arrived next to my pen tool. So I'm going to click to close the shape. Oh, I've accidentally done that, so I can even just undo and it'll go back to my last point. So let's close that shape again and then drag that handle and give it a nice organic shape. That's not bad. If at any point you want to change your shape, you can always use the direct selection tool, the white cursor. And if you click on a point, it will then activate that point. You can move that point around in space, and you can change the handles as well, which will change the shape overall. I like that a little bit more. I think it's slightly more interesting, a bit more dynamic. So I'm going to put this over to one side for now, and I'm going to go back to the internet to find a really nice, interesting background. Okay, this time let's try something a little bit different. I'm going to go with sunset clouds texture and see what that looks like. So I've gone for sunset to have the slightly more pinky tones, and I really like the texture of the skies. This is the one that I'm going to pick. So let's go in and copy. Go back into Illustrator. Now I'm zoomed in at the moment. This picture is likely going to be quite large, so I'm going to press Control minus, and that will zoom me in out rather. And I can zoom in by pressing the plus, so minus and plus. Now I'm going to go Control V and bring in my picture. There we go, it wasn't too big after all. So I'm going to just move it to one side. Now at the moment it's behind my image. So I want to bring this forward. Now for the next part, for the clipping mask, which is the next little tool, we need to make sure that any shape is on top of it. I like to think of it like a cookie cutter. Now when you're using a cookie cutter, you always have the cookie dough on the surface and the cookie cutter on top. Of course, you wouldn't just have the cookie cutter on the surface and then try and drape the dough over the top and try and press it out. That's not how that works. So we want this on top. So I'm going to go right click, arrange, bring to front, and now it's on top. Lovely. So I'm going to move my shape, whichever area I want to pick up. Maybe I want the darker bit, maybe I want the lighter bit. I'm going to bring it over here, and then I'm going to select the two together. Now I can either just lasso the two, or I can click, press shift and click the other. Either works. And then I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to go make clipping mask. Look at that, so easy, really dynamic. I like that. Now in fact I think I'm actually going to flip this around. I'm going to change the orientation. So we're going to go to right click, transform, and then reflect. So this is our next fun little tool. So you can change it on the horizontal, so it will be flipped on the horizon, or vertically, so it's like a mirror image, which is what I want. You can also change the angle if you so wish. So you can change it to 90 degrees or 180. I'm going to keep it to the vertical like a mirror, press OK. That's more like it. I think that's going to be a bit more interesting. Now I want to make it a bit bigger. If I just left click and drag it, you'll see the proportion changes, which I definitely don't want. So to keep the proportion, I'm going to press shift on my keyboard. By doing so, I can't change the proportion. I'm not going to lose my shape. So I'm going to release the button first and then the shift key. I could even rotate this in space, apart from using the transform function for very specific orientation. I can just go over. Now, rather than hovering right on the little point here, if I come off just ever so slightly, there we go, you can see the little rotational tool being highlighted for me. So I'm going to click down now, and then I can change the orientation so I can rotate in space. I also think this is a little bit strong in terms of colour. I don't want it to detract from anything that I'm going to put on top of it. So I'm going to change the opacity ever so slightly. Now, if something is opaque, it means that you cannot see through it. So like your hand is opaque. If it was translucent, that means you can slightly see through it, like a piece of tracing paper. If it's transparent, like glass, you can see all the way through. So if it's opacity, we're going to go up here. It's currently at 100%. Of course it is, it's fully opaque. I'm going to change it to, let's try 80%. That's a bit more like it. So it's a lot softer now. I prefer that. But obviously you can have a go at changing the opacity if you wish. And one more time, I'm going to start a new layer. So again, you can see my object on this layer. In fact, let's give them a name. So this one's called background, and let's call this one pen shape, as in for the pen tool, and I'm going to lock that one as well. There we go. So now I'm not going to play with anything and move it around. And then of course I need to start a new layer. There we go. Now we're working on the next layer. Well, let's start finding some little characters and props to jazz this up slightly. So I'm going to look for vector. Anytime you look for a vector shape, it automatically gives you something which has nice, simple, cartoony kind of edges. You can look up cartoon as well if you prefer. So I'm going to look up vector animals. And there's lots to choose from. They're always quite simple shapes, which sort of lends itself quite well to our needs. Sometimes they can be really quite complicated as well though, but they can be quite tricky to manipulate. The one that I'm going to go for is this one. Now in fact I don't want to use all of the animals out of this. I'm going to just keep the bear and the rabbit, but we can very simply remove the white background. You always want to pick a neutral background. Most of these pretty much do. You don't want anything which is too busy like this one of a background, otherwise you won't be able to remove the characters very easily at all. So let's go in and copy and Control V to paste it. Okay. So from here I'm going to show you how to use the image trace function. So to get there, we need to go to Window, down to, in alphabetical order, Image Trace. Now we have different options here. We can use watercolor, or high color, low color, grayscale, black and white, outline. If I click on outline, you'll see what that looks like. It looks really bizarre. You see, there we go. Depends on what you're looking for. Might be what you want. Could use grayscale. We're going to go to high colour or maybe low colour, considering that they're simple shapes already. That looks great. You can change the number of colours involved as well if you so wish. Again, this is quite a simple design, so that's not going to affect it too much. So from here I'm going to close that now, and I'm going to go to expand here up at the top. It says convert tracing object to paths. And you'll see all of the vector shapes now highlighted, like so. You can see all the little anchor points which we can manipulate with our pen tool and our direct selection tool. While I have it on the selection tool, it's still a single object. In order to interact with it and just separate out the parts that I want, I need to use the direct selection tool. So I click on this one. Now as soon as I have clicked on that, it starts to identify the different sections, there we go, you see, as different vector shapes. So by doing so, if I click on the white part, I can just press delete on my keyboard and suddenly it's all gone. Look at that. Now, as I said, I just wanted to keep the bear and the rabbit, so I'm going to lasso the parts of the animals that I don't want, so I'm just lassoing it and pressing delete. Sometimes if that's a little bit like that, just press delete again. There we go, nearly there. Bye bye little hedgehog, maybe next time. Okay, super. In fact, and now you see it's still connected. So what I want to do is I'm going to go right click, ungroup. And now when I go back in, see it's now identifying all the different vector parts again. So I'm going to select just the rabbit, right click, group, just the bear, right click, group. And now I can move them independently. As it is, I think I'm going to get rid of these shadow areas, and there's still a little white part between his legs. There we go. That's more like it. I like that quite a bit more. So I'm going to, now I can go back to the selection tool and I can move them into place, ready for the next part. I think I want some trees to go into my design. There we go. So lots of different designs. Some of them are a bit busy. I want to keep them nice and simple. I think this is going to be perfect. Well, you can do it from here. So copy and into here and paste. Now I'm going to press Control and minus to zoom out, and I need to be careful because my rabbit and my bear are on here. I could even put these on a separate layer, which I think I might do now. So I've created a new layer, I've named it trees, and I've brought them in, and I'm just going to temporarily lock my rabbit and my bear so I don't end up moving them around and interacting with them while I'm working on the trees. So I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did last time. So let's go Window, Image Trace, and because they are fairly simple vector shapes, I'm just going to go to Low Color. And now I need to go to Expand. You must click Expand or the next bit won't work. And I'm going to use my Direct Selection tool to click on the white part and delete that. There we go. And I'm going to isolate just the trees that I want, I think. So I'm going to keep this one. I really like this one and this one, I think. So let's get rid of the part that we don't need. And now again I can move them all together, but there's quite a bit of white background as you can see here, and a couple of little pieces. So what I'm actually going to do, rather than trying to click every little piece of white background, if I could press Control plus to zoom in, if I focus on this, I'm actually going to click the sections I want to keep. So this one, Shift on my keyboard and click, I'm still pressing Shift as I'm clicking the parts that I want. Now I've released the Shift, I'm going to go over to the Selection tool, move that to one side. Look at that, now it's just left behind the mess that I don't want, and now I can just use the Direct Selection tool to delete that, and I'm going to repeat that for these two. So I've got rid of all the messy white background, but if I go back in, they are still attached to one another. So just as before, I want to select them, right click, ungroup, select just the sections together, right click, group, group and group, and now they are separate and can move apart from one another. So I think I'm going to have them in this kind of orientation. Let's make this guy a little bit bigger. Now in order to keep the proportion as we did before for our shape, I'm going to press the Shift key on my keyboard and stretch it up. That's pretty good, I quite like that. And this one I want a little bit bigger as well. Let's make him a fair bit bigger, and I want to give some sense of depth here, so I'm going to move the limbs around. Now unfortunately I've lost the colour, and they're a little bit uniform. I want a bit more dynamic. So with the direct selection tool, I'm going to go to this one here. Rather than, let's make it a darker green. So up in the top we have the fill colour and the stroke colour, which is currently off at the moment. If I was to put it on, there you go, you'd see it's got a stroke colour on it now. So if I just Control C to undo that, let's pick a darker green. Oh, that's quite nice, I like that one. I think I might keep this guy as he is. And how about a nice autumnal orange? Yeah, I like that. That's pretty good. Now, obviously, the only thing we have is that our bear and our rabbit are currently behind our trees, which we don't want. So if we go back to our layers function, I'm going to click that for now, and I'm going to drag the rabbit and bear up to the top. And by doing so, it moves them in front. And now from here, what I'm going to do is just unlock everything, apart from perhaps the background. And now I can move things around in space and play with the shapes and the orientation until I'm happy with it. I can also go back in and I could even perhaps rotate. Now I'm happy with the orientation, I'm going to lock them again, and I'm going to create a new layer for the last part, which is my font. Now I can use the type tool, which is over here. If I click in, let's just do it up here, I can put be there for you. Now you can see, to begin with, it starts very small, and obviously it's a very basic font. So let's make it a bit bigger to begin with. We can change the font size up here, just like we do with any other document that we're familiar with. But you can also, when it's using the selection tool, you can actually treat it like an object. Again, you can, if you want to squish it or push it together, then you certainly can. Otherwise, press Shift to keep the orientation. Now, I think this might be a little bit static, even if it was on a bit of a slant. So I'm going to show you the next level. So let's just delete that for now. Back over in the type tool, I'm going to press and hold until I find the type on a path tool. Okay, now it's going to be looking for a path, so we're going to give it a path to follow. So let's go to the paintbrush. Not that we tend to use the paintbrush very often, but this lends itself quite well. I want a nice flowing curve through here, so it's going to look a little bit janky to begin with, but then if I let go, there we go, it smooths it out. And I'm not going to see this at the end anyway. So let's go back to our type on a path tool and see it's only interacting with the line because everything else is on a different layer. And if I click on here, now I can do it again. I'll be there for you. And you can see it following the path. That's pretty good. Okay. So it's currently just the really basic font, so let's make it much more interesting. If we go up to the top, you can choose the fonts here, but you can't see them, which is obviously inconvenient. But if we go back in and we right click, we go font, it then shows us every font we have access to. And obviously every computer is going to be different, but Illustrator starts with a good number of different interesting fonts. You might find one that you like the look of, but I think we can do even better than just the standard fonts. So we're going to go down and we're going to go to dafont.com. This is a really cool website and we have access to it at school. And you can see if I scroll down, it just has the most recent ones that people have uploaded. Obviously that changes regularly. There's every kind of font that you could want or imagine. So for instance, there's typewriter fonts, there's sci-fi fonts. I'm going to keep it to a brush font. There we go. These are the kind of things that I'm probably going to be looking for, and I'm going to spend some time scrolling through until I found one that I like. So this is the one that I'm going to pick for today. So So I'm just going to go over here and click download. And then once you've saved it in an appropriate folder or in the downloads, it will be available down here. If we double click to open, you'll have access to the files here. There we go. So I've double clicked and it shows us what it's going to look like. So now I click install. Now that I have my font installed, if I select my font again and right click once more, go to font, I can look for it in here. I knew it's called Selima, so I'm going to press S. There we go, and it's there. So I've resized it ever so slightly, and now I can change the fill. Not really feeling the black. Let's try a white. That's a lot nicer already. You can change the stroke if you wanted. So perhaps I might go for a subtle grey edge. I'm really pleased with that. I think that's really effective. This would make for a wonderful birthday card perhaps, or obviously a gift card or an occasion with a variety of different kind of textures and fonts. You could use it for convention gift bags. The limits really are endless. So I hope you found that really useful. Catch you next time.